Good morning, everyone. Welcome to WX Live webinar. This is webinar number 131, live from Atlanta, Georgia. And this morning we have Jeff Graham. He's going to be showing us his biometric integration in WX development. So it's all yours, Jeff.
Well, greetings to the WX Live group and here in Atlanta. And thanks to Andy for sharing a little of his presentation time with me for this subject. It was a challenge getting the palm scanners integrated. And what we're going to cover today is why palm scanners are a good choice for security and how they work. Then we'll have an example using a .NET assembly made from an SDK, and then a demonstration of a WinDev class that makes it easy to use that .NET assembly. So why would you want to use palm scanners? The most important point on this slide, in Japan, all the ATMs actually use palm scanners, not pins or smart cards. So, and the nice thing is it can be used with no contact for hygienic purposes, and that's why it's used in hospitals. This little graph is secure. Of course, any kind of biometric device is more secure than cards or dongles. And the way it works is it detects your hand being above the sensor, and then it emits a near-infrared scan, and it reads the live veins in your palm, makes a template of it, encrypts it, passes it back to the processing, and then they convert it into a template that can be used for identification. The advantages are that your palm does not change once you reach near full growth. Elementary kids, their palms do change, and they have to be re-enrolled sometimes. These are some of the different scanners that will hold a palm device. On the left here, this is the scanner itself, and then it can be mounted in various ways. We have a whole collection of the guides back in the back that I'm sure you've seen, and we'll be using this one, a demonstration, later on. And I will, but this is probably the three important points about palm scanners: superior security, superior accuracy, better acceptance. There are no public databases of palms. They can't be. In fact, palm template made in your application cannot be stolen and used by any other. So it is very secure. Now, if you wanted to use a palm scanner in your WinDev or WebDev, WinDev mobile application, how could you do that? You have three options. One, you can develop your own, or you can use a non-WinDev third-party product. We've tried two of those. Or you can use our .NET assembly in class. And the purpose of this demonstration is to show you how easy that is. Now, you develop your own. First, have to purchase the SDK for $5,000. And if you don't have Visual Studio Professional, you'd have to purchase that as well. But you can't make a .NET assembly with the free express version. Then you have to learn their authentication process, and their examples are only in C++, C#, Visual Basic, or Java. So, and I'm not an experienced programmer in any of those languages, or was not when I started this. I certainly know a lot more about it now. And then you have to integrate with WinDev, and that turned out to be a lot more challenging than I expected. From the documentation, I thought Java would be the easiest and most platform independent. That turned out not to be the case. And then it turned out that the SDK did not support 64-bit in Java, which I needed. So I ended up going back to C#. But anyway, and then periodically updates come from Fujitsu that you have to work into. And then if you're doing all this, it's taken a lot of time from your WxDevCon development. So yeah, that has to be figured out. Now, WinDev third-party products, M2Sys is probably the better known of them. And they cost about $300 per installation just for their license for each scanner. And then you have to buy the scanner as well. And all of these require their own database, and you have to have all of the templates in there at one time. So even if they're no longer needed or they're inactive people, you have to go in and explicitly delete them out of their database. And I just found them very difficult to integrate with. So we decided to go for it, do it ourselves. And it was painful. But we ended up with a .NET assembly with a WinDev interface that made it easier. And part of the problem is that certain data types don't transfer easily between C# and those type of languages in WinDev, with different internal structures. So then this is basically the solution. And you notice down at the bottom right over here, these are used for the WinDev interface. They have the methods that are called from WinDev, and they have the arguments defined so that it facilitates transferring data back to WinDev. I'll be glad to show anyone more details if they're interested after this is over, but I can't give this code away because of our license agreement. And it does require Visual Studio Professional, like I mentioned. So why would you use our product? It's you use your own analysis. You can put the template data in any of your data files that you want, or we offer a biometric table definition that you can start with that stands alone and uses table linking to go to whatever table you want, and we'll cover that more in a bit. So another nice thing about it is when it's in your data and your analysis, it's very easy for you to pick out IDs and templates that you want to have active at any given client. So if you have a time clock application and you know what workers are expected to come through there, then you load only those templates. And nobody else is going to be identified. Or if you have certain ones that are administrators or for patients in a hospital, theirs would be a different set of templates. And you use different hand guides. There's special hand guides for elementary kids, and it's amazing how well it works. Elementary, little small palms. And you can control in your application guidance and imaging, because the scanner actually gives feedback on where to put your hand. If you don't have your hand correct, it'll say flatten your hand or whatever. And we added speech to this, but you can turn the speech off if you don't like it. So then you import a class, and you work only with that class in your project. You don't have to make direct calls to the WinDev, the .NET assembly. You can if you want, but it's there. But the PALM data is secure. Like I said, you cannot spoof it. With finger scanners, fingerprint scanners, definitely, you can have a spoof of a fingerprint because it doesn't require liveness. In a palm scan, it has to have blood flowing through the veins to be detected. Setting up event processing is easy. You only write a procedure, and we have examples of that. So how do you use our software? The steps are, you just unzip the files that are required. There's multiple DLLs from Fujitsu that you have to have in addition to ours, and put them in your runtime folder. In a project, that's typically your exe directory. Then you install the PalmSecure device drivers. You include 2 assemblies. You have to include the system.dll and our .NET assembly. And the reason for that is there's an anomaly, and we have to use framework 4. And it does not, you have to explicitly specify the system.dll to be a framework 4 one. And then you import our class into your project. You write custom enrollment code based on the sample we provide, and decide where you want to store the templates, either in a separate table or within your data tables itself. Then you write the identification code. If you're trying to do logins, then it would put locate the person. We'll have a little example of that later. But you basically create, to use it for identification or verification, you create an array of string IDs that you want to enable, an array of matching binary templates as buffers. Then you call one of our methods, update templates, that creates the structure and the format that's required by the scanner. And it loads up to 1,000 IDs in one group in the scanner. And then you don't have to do that again. Then you code whatever you want to do with it in the process, which is application dependent. And you have to display any error messages that occur. So what does the biometric table that gives extra flexibility look like? And I hope you can see that okay. If not, you've got your handouts there. But as the unique ID, a GUID, so that you could have as many of these as you need. That allows you to have left and right palms enrolled for the same ID. And the biometric type is in there because we also use this for finger scanning. So but the table length is the key to the flexibility. So when you enroll it, you say, I'm enrolling employees. You put the employee table that you want to reference in there and put in either a text ID or a numeric ID, whichever you need, or both. And then the hand guide references there because you have to numeric ID to read another file. In the enrollment, you then, and this is only in the enrollment, you get a byte array back that is the template data. And you have to convert that to a buffer. That's this process here. So you get a unsigned byte array back. It's typically 2,000 to 3,000 bytes. Then you create a buffer of that size and transfer the byte array to that buffer and put it in a binary field, the template binary, and then add the record. On the identify event, where you get it back, it gives you a code. And the buffer at that point is 0 length, so you don't even use it. And the identify, you first read the biometric file and then check and see what account it is. That's what the case is here. And I don't have two here, but in our sample project, we get it from 2 different tables. So what do you have to do in your actual, when you're in your runtime part of your application? All you have to do is instantiate the class, the WinDev class, and that will, the constructor initializes the Palm scanner, activates the libraries, and then when it exits the scope of that instantiation, the destructor releases the scanner. Then you have to designate the .NET event procedure that you coded. You have to build the arrays of strings and temporary template binary buffers and call update templates. And if you're going to identify, you just call identify. And for verification, you pass an ID that you want to verify, and it'll make sure it is that person. If you have to exit your application or whatever, you cancel those processes with a cancel method, and then you can either close the app and go if you want, or the destructor will take care of it. Now, the other part you have to do is you have to design how you're going to enroll the palms. And that's application dependent, and whether you want guidance to show sound or and you can show them on a text field, or you can show them in an image. These are just some kind of tidbits from development if you're doing any kind of .NET development yourself. There's no PC support for external languages in the free technical support. You can purchase a support contract, but they will not help you. And when you are developing a .NET assembly, you're constantly changing the assembly. Well, you can't remove it and put it in again. It crashes WinDev. And if you just put a new assembly in there and recompile or refresh, it does not pick up the changes in the .NET assembly. But I noticed in the release 20 versions, they have fixed this problem. And if you're doing a project that has both a 32-bit and a 64-bit configuration, you can't have two different .NET assemblies. And these are, dependent on being 32 or 64. They have to match. So there's no include in configuration option for .NET assemblies. I've suggested that, but I don't think they understood what I needed it for. And buffers don't transfer between C# and WinDev. And if you're trying to develop a .NET project in WinDev, that's a whole different subject, but not covered in this presentation. So this is what the sample project looks like. Now, in the upper left, it loads from either the biometric table we said, or it loads from another source which is activated by a query, just as an example, so that you can see it. And here, this button is where you specify your DotNetDelegate procedure. And these buttons are all just test all the various methods. And you get this to make sure your scanner is working, to understand how it's doing. The guidance, if you activate the guidance, text messages come out in this part, in this field, and they're verbalized. If you don't want them verbalized, you can turn it off with the speech button up here. And there's two different ways of doing the image streaming. One is that you get the data, it's a bitmap, and you can manipulate it if you like, and then put it in your image. Or you can just specify an image, and the bitmap will be transferred to that image. Now in enrollment, this shows two different, enrolling two different tables, two different types. So, now this is after a successful identification of one of the accounts. Oh, and I didn't mention that this button, the Set Windows event, DotNetDelegate in 64-bit, which is the most common now, does not work prior to release 19. And so I had to provide a Windows event for earlier versions. So this first identification here, you notice it is from the biometric table, which is a GUID, but you can't pass a string through a Windows event, so it comes out saying there's no match. But in the other data, the first one is from the biometric table. This is from the query, where the ID stored are numeric. So it does find it passes the ID with a Windows event. But the DotNetDelegate can handle either. So that's why the DotNetDelegate was important. In these are the streaming images. The guidance messages are here, but at the end, it passes the string to that as well. If you have a large number of data, we store the data in normal hyperfile client server anyway, which can be anywhere, and the client then can load and do the identification. But if you have a lot of IDs that need to be identified, it's probably more efficient to do your identification on the server. And that processing is kind of like you pass the byte, the BUR it's called, which is a byte array, to the server using a socket. And it can, like the multi-threading presentation that we saw a couple of weeks ago, it was, you could do that very easily to pass the data to the server. And the server actually can have multi-processing identification, separate threads for concurrent identifications if you have a lot of clients. But that's a extra charge version. It's not an expensive charge. So if you're interested in seeing the code of the class or the sample code project. Pardon?
One while I'm typing here. I was saying I wasn't going to type that out, so I was making fun of the fact that it was an L or a Y.
Yeah, just send me an email and I'll send you the links.
Okay, you'll send the link.
Right. And here's our email address, or my email address. And if you look at our website, please don't laugh. It hasn't been updated in years, and it's a static one. We don't market by the web by any means. We don't market at all, actually. Now I have a little video showing how you can put this in the project. I'll switch to that. Let's hope this works. Can you hear that?
I think you'll have to narrate it through your microphone.
What?
I think you'll have to do it.
Okay. I understand you can't hear this, so what we're doing is just extracting the files at this point and putting them in the runtime directory. And then we're putting the biometric table in there as well. And that's just unzipping it into where it's needed. And now, what's next here? And just closing that out. And now we're adding the .NET assembly that we wrote to the project. And the system one's already there. And we're adding the .NET assembly, which is just the DLL there. And that's added in. And then the other piece that we need is the class. So import the class from the project, from the install file directory. Now there's the class that interfaces. So this window, this little login window from the CRM example, we're going to add palm scanning identification to it. So you have to instantiate the class as the first step. And I'll tell you, if I were typing this, it would be a lot slower. So that's why I put it on a video. Try to save a little time in the presentation. And then at the end of the initialization of the window, you want to designate the DotNetDelegate procedure, which is the next thing that will happen here. We have to create a procedure for updating the templates. We talked about this is the DotNetDelegate procedure. And here we're adding the biometric table to the analysis. And like I said, you don't have to use this table, but it gives you more flexibility in your application. And then you did the analysis generation. And if anybody wants this stopped and ask questions, then we can do it. But it's just to show how easy it is. Now, I copied and pasted the update templates code here. But you see, the important part is that you're looping through the biometric table, adding the GUID, the unique ID, and the template binary as a buffer. And then you pass that by calling the update templates, which is this call. And then I put a record out saying how many were loaded. That's just for demonstration purposes. So now we go back to the Windows initialization code and designate this as the next step. And this is the set .NET procedure. And you pass the window name in the event that you have a global procedure processing this. It'll know exactly where the event came from. And then the last step is that you call identify. I think I'm talking on the video there, and I don't remember what I was saying, so patiently. Oh, this is, we put the other piece that you have to code yourself is the procedure for the event processing. And that's to save time, I just copied and pasted that in there. And you can see that's where the, right here is the result arguments. It patches the type of request that caused the event, the code, and the unique ID. In this case, since we're not doing enrollment, we don't need the other fourth argument, the array. So this is, let's keep going here. It's playing very slowly for some reason. Come on. All right, and then the last step is you put the identify call in there. And then we're going to run a quick test of this. And this, I'm just making a comment about the class sets the type of hand guide for you to store into your record. Speed it up there. Oh, we skipped too far. Oh, you know, this is the, no, we did skip too far. This is actually showing you the running of the demo project. We'll look at this again too, if we have time. How are we doing on time? Oh, okay. Now you see the guidance messages coming up at this point and the streaming images. And this is showing an enrollment of an employee. And then you load the back in and do an identification. And it found the employee that was enrolled. So that's it. Let's put this. So.
And Jeff, someone in the chat asked if you would open those links that you showed on the slide there earlier.
Sure. But it's easiest for me to email them to them. So.
Okay.
And I'm glad to do that. What I'd like to do now is just kind of, I'll have to take that away. And let's look at the project since we have a little more time. And I did put the code up a little larger to see. Now this is the event processing for that you saw in the little video. And where we read the biometric table, get the type of table out of there. Well, this is the enrollment process. And you know from your application whether you're enrolling accounts or employees. And then you set that information in the table length field file and the type of hand guide, the dates. And then you convert the buffer that's passed to you to a buffer to store in the template binary field. Then when you want to identify, it uses that information. But let's look, just run it and then we'll look some more. And it has that reset question so you can run this test in the various different types of enrollment. Now we're going to set the DotNetDelegate with this procedure, which is nothing but calling the method and passing the procedure name. We're going to set the guidance, and this streaming goes to this image, this streaming goes to this one. That's the two different types of streaming information. Now we'll pick an employee to enroll randomly here and start enrollment. And it comes out and says ready, but you're not hearing it because the speakers are muted. So it tells you move the hand, ready again. And then it tests your hand twice to make sure it can identify the buffer. And then it called the event, and it stored a buffer of 2274. Yeah, the guide is just to show you how far to push up your hand.
So when you're doing that, you're also straightening your hand?
Yeah, you want to spread your fingers out.
Okay.
And it'll tell you flatten your hand if you don't do that.
And when you get the image wrong, if you get it slightly, off axis, does the software straighten it, or does it just say no?
It rotates a little bit is fine. If it's too much, if you put it sideways, it will not read. So it does have to use that.
Okay.
Okay. And if you don't have a guide, it'll tell you to move your hand back, forward, and help you position your hand. And what happens is you learn that very quickly, where to put your hand.
Is that all in the SDK?
Yes. The guidance message is part of the SDK.
So the SDK itself is what's totally manipulating the little sensor.
Yes.
And then then they provide you only with C# interface.
Well, C# or C++ or Java, but no other interface than that. So what I had to do is take that streaming information and pass it back to WinDev through a DotNetDelegate so that it can show in WinDev. Let's do another one here, and we'll see it again. And I can also show you, you can't mix it in this right here, the no guide processing, but that is interesting. We'll demonstrate it another way. But we want to enroll again. Oh, I need to do the other palm. It's already enrolled that one. And this one is an account. And that's the second test here. Okay, it's complete. So now we want to load the biometric table. And that's the message that was, I think you saw that. That we now have two IDs in there. And if, pardon me?
Sorry, the second one that you did your left hand. That
Right.
one was enrolled?
It's now enrolled.
Okay, was it previously enrolled?
No.
Okay.
At
So
the
what's
very
the-
beginning, it has an option to reset all the data and you lose all the enrollment.
Okay. What's the normal detect time after an enrollment?
Okay, right here, we're going to do an identify now. I think I did load those. And you can reload them after you enrolled someone, and that's what you do. So now we start identify. Right hand, that's how fast it is.
Wow.
And it brought in the biometric table, detected it was an employee, looked in the employee table and got the information for the name. Okay, now you would do whatever you want to do. Then if you want to do identify again, now we'll use left hand, and it detected that it was an accounts table where the information came from, and it looked up the account that we enrolled.
When you started this project, how many different types of things did you look at? I mean, you mentioned fingerprint scanners, but did you look at the one that measures your finger?
I believe it was in 1998 was the first one I did. And I made an ActiveX using the Verifinger SDK. And that worked very well until release 17, and PCSoft broke the ActiveX function. And but they did finally provide me a patch to WinDev that would allow it to work. Well, we knew it wasn't going to work after that. So then I went and did another interface with Verifinger using Java. And that was very difficult and was not real happy. So then we started looking around and found the palm scanners. And we thought that was perfect because it's a guide, it's fast, it's not touching it. The problem with the finger scanners, after a kid has a cut on his finger, it doesn't work. Or they start getting junk on there, and you have to clean the scanner again. So there was, in a lunch line, it worked really well back in the old ActiveX, but it did not work great in the subsequent version.
And is that where this is primarily sold, in schools?
That's what we developed it for.
For schools.
Right.
Okay.
And it's in our, pardon me.
Well, I mean, isn't there also a biometric one that measures the shapes of your fingers or something?
Yes, there is, but those are really expensive. A palm scanner, where they're about $2,000 a piece.
Oh, so, I see. So it's a combination of the scanner and the ability to get it into WinDev.
Right. And these scanners, I just looked up the cost of them. I think they're about, let's see, I wrote it down somewhere here. Right, okay. And then you have to have a guide with it. And then we haven't determined what our software will cost, but and what I've done in this recent, after putting it into our school software, I made it generalized so that it's easy to put in a WinDev project. At least I feel it's really quick. As you saw, there was very few steps to put it into a window. Now, is there any of this that anyone would like to see the code? Or you get all the code if you download the links to look at. But while we can discuss it, I'll be glad to go over anything. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for listening, and contact me if you have any questions.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. And